Introducing Recorded Content, a podcast for small, scrappy B2B marketing teams who want to get the most out of podcasting. In each episode, we capture stories from industry experts and podcasters. Listen in and uncover what it takes to launch, run, and grow a successful B2B podcast. Check out and subscribe to the show on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows. Let's jump in.
Hey, this is Justin Brown. I'm the co-founder of Motion and your host for this episode of Recorded Content. Recorded Content is brought to you by Motion, a done-for-you podcast agency for small, scrappy B2B tech marketers. Today, I have on Pragya Mishra. Pragya and I met during the pandemic as she was spearheading the launching of a video podcast in the chatbot space. She peppered me with questions and she went to launch something as someone who had no real background in video or really as a creator. Her path making videos helped her to meet the CEO of Shield, where she eventually landed her dream job. The path of podcasting isn't always linear, and today we'll hear from Pragya about how podcasting changed her life and how she continues to use social content to stay ahead. Enjoy. So when it comes to podcasts, one of my favorite things is the way that people use them in a million different ways. I think there's a big issue where folks are tentative to start a podcast because of course, the work that comes with it. And, they may not know what they'll get out of it. And I think your story is great for that. I don't know that you knew what you would get out of your podcast when you started it. So for you started your video podcast about your space. But before we get into how, what you got out of it, why did you decide you were going to start this video podcast?
Okay, so that's interesting because in the last company where I was working, which is a small startup in Denmark called Bot Supply, I felt like there was a need that not enough was said in a very human way from a conversational design perspective, which is a small field of designers who design conversations of chatbots that humans are having. And despite the fact that our audience was big B2B enterprises, and it's not the kind of typical audience that walks into your website and then says, oh, I want to buy this because it's a really big deal size, I thought it was an interesting space to educate the customers in general about the field. So I kind of somehow, after many failed attempts, convinced the conversational designer, who typically was very shy, to come on to the show with me. And we sat on a couch and we discussed. I asked him really stupid questions, which okay, what does a chatbot do? And how does this happen? And how does it work like this? So it was almost from a completely non-expert, a layman asking questions to an expert perspective. And it became like a show that was just a small 2 minutes, 3 minutes videos, small series talking about a certain specific topic where I was asking questions and he was giving me answers. So it was born out of a need to educate the market in a more general term, and not to educate the market about my product and why you should buy this, completely just from an educational perspective. That's how it started.
Yeah, and one of the things that I loved about that show was that your podcast was very focused on a niche space, which I think at the time, and over the pandemic, and as people launch shows in every space, sure, so many have cropped up, but at the time, I it really caught my eye that you were making this very niche show for a very niche audience of people who had questions about chatbots specifically. What problem were you looking to solve with your podcast?
I think the biggest thing that I was trying to answer was that that there's this perception in the market that when you try to take the human out of the picture in a customer support role, there's a lot that can go wrong and it's not cool, etc., etc. But the idea that there's actually humans who are building that conversation was what I wanted to bring up front, and that's what I was trying to solve by asking these questions.
And were you ever worried that you wouldn't get anybody to pay attention because it was too focused? And let me kind of put a caveat into that question. I personally have seen over the last 6 months plus that if you have a niche show, you have a better chance of breaking through because you're speaking to a specific audience, and then you can go more broad over time. A great example of this, we have had him on the show, is Yag of the ABM Conversations podcast. He started off very niche. Now he's bringing on guys like Seth Godin, Guy Kawasaki, and what have you, and he can do whatever the heck he wants because he established a very niche space. So when you're heading in and you decide, I'm going to start this video podcast. It's going to be 2 to 3 minutes in length. It's going to be very specific and targeted towards people who want to speak layman's terms. Chatbot, were you worried that no one would care?
No, I'm usually when I want to do things, I start out by wanting to solve a problem that I think exists, even if it's for a very few people. And it wasn't about numbers. Since it was the first time I was doing anything on video, it was more about the learning process for me. So even if 10 people saw it, I really wouldn't have mind. And so I really did not have any numbers expectation that I want to be the biggest podcaster in this space. Had no such kind of idea. So I
Well,
just
with 10 viewers, you probably would be the biggest podcaster
yeah,
in the space.
probably, probably, surely, and especially if they were all in Denmark, then I was probably getting 10% of the market share. But yeah, it was interesting because I just wanted to learn. I had never used any, and it was completely a home project that I picked up a camera that I had, which I never even used the video functionality of, and I used to just use it for taking pictures. I said, okay, let me set it up. I didn't even have a tripod. I put 17 books and the camera on top, and from there I went on YouTube tutorials and I pinged you a lot. How do I do this? How do I do that? And so it was just completely learning on the internet on how to put together something on video. So it was super interesting for me. I was very, very satisfying that I could actually go from zero to knowing how to do a whole small video series, video podcast by myself.
Oh, it was great to watch the evolution of it in real time, and that was a question. The next couple questions that I have for you are around that process. So, why did you decide to go? And it's funny. I've talked to a couple people who have decided to start the video route, and as someone who does video a lot, I know that that is the most challenging route to take. You could have just started with audio, and it would have been much more simple. But you decided to start with video. So why did you want to go the video route?
I guess it's because I mean, from a as a personal thing, I like aesthetics. So for me, pictures speak more than words. Videos speak more than pictures, and there is something special about two people sitting down next to each other and discussing a topic, because then it almost makes you feel like you're a part of that audience. Of course, people are doing that with podcasts, which is just audio based as well, but there is still something more special about actually seeing the face of the person who's talking to you and the person who's responding. And I think there is an element of trust building that you can do on a platform like LinkedIn by using video that is not so easily possible. That probably takes is possible and people have done it, but it takes much longer and way more consistency than video.
And what process did you take for creating your video content? Do you mind talking a little bit about your stack and maybe how you built your video content out? Because frankly, from my opinion, I mean, I saw your video content and it was as good or better than what you typically see on LinkedIn. So even though maybe you were putting some stuff together, that stacking your camera on top of some books and what have you, it still was a pretty professional setup when all said and done. So can you tell me a little bit about what went into the actual creation of your video content?
I think the basic foundation was somehow the fact that I had a good camera. So I think there is no denying the importance of the quality of image that you can capture. Um, I could have started with a webcam, but since it was two people, I needed an external camera that could record the entire couch in the setting with one person and the second person and record the whole conversation. So I started out with a good camera. I had a Fujifilm XS, which is a very old camera now. They have a new versions, but it's a very basic mirrorless camera, and I used just the video functionality of that. And from there, I think it was just the actual footage taken into Adobe Premiere Pro. I used Descript for the subtitles, which is actually something you recommended. I saw one of your LinkedIn posts about it, and I kind of like wow, it just blew my mind. And I used that, and then that's it. Then YouTube to upload it. So essentially, and yeah, I had a microphone with um, cat skin is I don't know what you call a dead cat. And so I just had bought, I did not even buy anything. I borrowed the microphone from someone, and I put my camera together, and then everything else was just things that I could find online.
And your story for what the podcast did for you is, I don't want to say it's different necessarily, because I work with these marketers who launch these podcasts, and one of my favorite things is the evolution of these professionals as I work with them, and I've seen it in a variety of ways. I've seen marketers get promotions because they launched this podcast and it's one of the most fun things that their business is now doing. And a CEO who may have been apprehensive, podcast, I'm not, it sounds like something fun or cutesy. I'm not sure if we want to do that because it's a newer medium for businesses. And then I watch as these shows launch, and the CEOs become huge evangelists of the podcast, and they love it. And all the people in their space are coming on and they're featuring them and creating content together. So I've seen that dynamic, but yours is a little bit different, where it was much more impactful on you, professionally, in terms of where you grew outside of your organization. So I don't want to, spoil the lead here. I'll let you tell the story. How did being a podcaster impact you professionally?
Yeah, so it was pretty direct impact, which I did not foresee at all, and it was not a part of the bigger picture, or at least it was not in my vision board that this is what I want to achieve from it. And what happened essentially was I was putting out these videos, and Andreas, who's the CEO of Shield, he also Shield has a very small team, so he somehow, because we were in the same city, which probably doesn't matter, but in the same space in LinkedIn, he saw one of my videos, and he wrote to me saying, "Hey, I really like what you guys are doing, and I've always wanted to do something similar, and I think it's the energy that comes out of it is nice." And that's how I kind of got chatting with him about the things that they're doing at Shield. And I had seen Shield a lot being talked about, and it's very rare that you see brands like that being talked about from a consumer perspective. So I was very curious that what is the SaaS product that the customers are talking about and making screenshots and whatnot. So I kind of started chatting with him, and I said, "Oh, this is cool. You guys can do this, 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 then this." That led to a coffee, and that led to me being at Shield, heading the marketing team. So yeah, it's a super super nice story, even from a kind of like how you got hired stories. But yeah, that's what happened.
And I think that it's just so true as to what the podcast can do for you. I mean, for me, it gave me an identity on LinkedIn. I had always been someone who watched, I saw what other people were posting, and I always made the excuses for myself that everybody makes, which is, I could do that, but I'm busy working, like I could, be a social influencer, but I'm busy working in the business and doing my thing every day. So you guys can go out there and talk all the time while I'm working. And that's like a very selfish way of looking at it, because you have all this knowledge that you can give to people. And I think what the podcast does is it allows you to have confidence in your voice that you should speak and you should say something. And then in turn, you start to get noticed, whether that is by potential customers or by your future boss.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it's very interesting, because when I started doing these videos and I started posting them on LinkedIn, I got so much feedback from people about, "Oh, this is great, but you could, next time if you change the light like this." So the community on LinkedIn is so amazing that no matter what you try, if you're doing something slightly different and if you're willing to put yourself out there, you will find allies without you even asking for them. So it's the same way that you stepped in and said, "Pragya, this, that, etc. You could change this, etc." There were other people who stepping in and saying, "This is how you can improve." So the word really spreads when you are willing to do something different and put yourself out there.
Yeah, and you were, when I was kind of getting my feet under me for posting on LinkedIn, you were like one of my first people who noticed my stuff, and you were asking me questions. I was like, "Oh, like I guess I'm kind of, someone who someone wants to ask questions to." And here we are, all these months, almost a year later. And we've talked a lot or a little, I guess, but it's going to be a lot about Shield to this point. And for those who don't know, I think we'll start there. What does Shield do?
So I think it's like if you like running and if you want to track your runs, you usually get yourself a running tracking watch or something. It's the same way. If you're a content creator and you're serious about creating content on LinkedIn, what Shield does is that gives you the ability to see the insights behind your data, the data that your content is creating. See how you grow with numbers through your content over a period of time. What are your top posts? How can you make decisions of your content based on that? So it does gives you analytics for your LinkedIn content.
And let's start there with LinkedIn content and what we're seeing do well. Are there any what trends are you seeing right now with content being posted on LinkedIn?
So I think the most recent that we've been seeing is that polls are getting a lot of views. A lot of people have been writing about it as well. So that's something new. It's super new that's happening in that space. But what we also hear, especially from a video perspective, is that videos don't get that many views. So what's the point of doing videos? But the reality is that LinkedIn doesn't count video views as a text post views. So a text post, if it appears in your feed, even if someone doesn't stop, gets counted as a view. Whereas on a video, someone has to actually stop and watch for at least 3 seconds, and then it gets counted. So in in return, you would always see a lot more engagement on a video post, which in turn then drives that entire idea that we were discussing before about building trust, that there are people who see your face, who are willing to engage with you, who ask you questions, and then you build a real relationship based on that kind of content.
Yeah, I actually did some napkin math at one point. I think I looked at 3 different accounts in Shield, and I calculated that based on engagement rate, a video view was equal to 4 or 5 text post views because the engagement rate was ridiculous, right? So I'm getting like you're seeing like 3 to 3.5% engagement rate, and for those in Pragya, you can correct me where I'm wrong here. Engagement is considered likes plus comments. So if you look at engagement rate, what I was seeing was the engagement rate on videos was coming out to 5x that of the average engagement rate of text posts. So, and none of this is perfect, but maybe you all can like write a white paper on it or something. That would be super interesting. But basically, yeah, you can multiply your video views by like 4 or 5 because I hear the same thing, right? So I make videos for my clients, and then they could write something and it gets 2,000 views, and then they post a video and it gets 400 views, and they're like, well, why is it being outperformed by my text? I'm spending so much more time to make the video, and the reality is that those 400 views are kind of finger quote 400 views because tons of more people saw it. And if you look at your engagement rate, it might be superior to that of your text post. So
It
yeah, I've
will
been looking at
always
the
be
same thing.
superior to that of your text post for sure. That's something I've noticed as well, that you just and it's something that everybody has the opportunity to test for themselves. It's really basic math. You just go into Shield, see your last 5 videos and last 5 posts, and just do the math on the engagement rate, and that's where you'll see that there is the engagement rate on the videos is higher for sure.
Yeah, and the one thing is you may not even know, because I'm basing it off of the engagement rate of the text post. So it very well may be that even more people are seeing the videos. The engagement rate is even higher on the videos. For me, I mean, my most engaged with content is my video content, but my most viewed content is my video content doesn't even go according to LinkedIn's tracking. I mean, it's not even close to that of if I write a text post.
Absolutely, and that's true for everybody, and it's just because of the way video views are counted.
And I'm curious, how are you seeing folks effectively using podcasts on LinkedIn?
I think, like you mentioned, one of my personal favorites as well is Yag. How he's actually grown from a very niche into into a place where he's today able to get guests like Seth and who all and who not what not. And it's so interesting because when you're a podcast host, you come with an authority an authority that you get because you've been doing something consistently, you've been doing it for a while, and because of that consistency, today you get to a place where you have guests who are world famous on your show. So it's I think one of the things that really probably people talk about a lot, the ones who are doing podcasts, and people who don't are a little less concerned about it, is the consistency part, that you really have to stick it out. It's not like you release one episode of something and suddenly you're going to be a superstar. It, as with content on LinkedIn, it takes time. You start writing, you write a post once. First you start with 2 posts a week, then you get it up to 3 posts a week, then it becomes 4, 5, then you're writing, before you know, you're writing every day. And that's when you start seeing that, okay, after an X months of consistently showing up, you start seeing results.
And we talked a little bit about how your personal brand helped you to land a job, and that's, you know, obviously one way to use your personal brand for success. But if someone's looking at, where do I even start? I mean, how can someone effectively use Shield to track the success of their personal brand?
I think it starts with what is it that you're trying to achieve with your personal brand. So we always say that it's important to know what is it that you want out of your personal brand. So let's say if you're not looking for a job change, let's say you're a consultant, a junior consultant in a consultancy, and you're happy with your job, you just want to have your voice heard. Then you know that you are looking at trying to establish some kind of thought leadership. So in that case, you know that it's important who are the people who are looking at your content. So with Shield, then you could use something like the audience demographics, where you can see for each piece of content what is the percentage of people from which companies, what countries, what are their job titles. So you can really hone in on the audience and then tune your content to fit the audience that you really want to attract. So that could be one of the ways. Of course, there are many. So for instance, if you want to land clients in a certain country, again, that's something that you can help with. If you want to understand why some of your posts resonate, and maybe you want to focus on those kind of posts, then you can see your top posts and see if there is something similar in all of them, and then decide to kind of form your content strategy based on that.
And let's talk about the anatomy of a post. And maybe we can talk about first a text post and then a video post. When it comes to a text post, what are some best practices for writing on LinkedIn?
So it's one of those things that we see in the posts that get a lot of traction. You would see as a common thread that the idea, and I think it's the first time I heard it was on a post by Justin Welsh, that that scroll, you have to be right for the scroll stoppers. As he says, that people are scrolling, whether it's on their phone or it's on their computers. People are scrolling through the feed, and suddenly they see something that they read something that they like, and they stop. So of course, when it's about a text post, the opening line or the hook becomes very important in this case. That you see something that is interesting, someone says poses a question or says something controversial, and you want to suddenly stop and you want to read what they want to say. So it's super important to get people to stop and click on that see more. That's why that first part, the first 3 lines, they're so critical to be able to achieve that. And then of course it's delivering on the promise of those really interesting opening lines, is to say something that adds value or makes people think or makes them want to say something. And the last part, which we also focus on a lot and we see some really good posts talking about, is also the CTA, the call to action. That if you want to engage your audience and you don't ask them a question, most probably they're not going to comment, because you said blah 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 and this is what I see. If you just leave it at that, then it's an observation that you're making, and that's what your post is about. But you could instead say, this is what I see, but do you see something different? When you're posting on LinkedIn, that makes people think that, oh, actually I do see something different, and that's where they make the effort of actually writing a comment. So it's super important to leave a simple question, pose a simple question to your audience, so that they could actually be curious and reply, because obviously by replying they're also learning about their own process.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I love the hook idea. And I took Justin Welsh's course way back I think like July of 2020, same time frame you and I met, where I was
Yeah.
trying to start to get my sea legs in terms of sharing, my views on things and on LinkedIn and what have you. And yeah, so he talks a lot about the hook, and if you get people to click that see more button, the odds that they're going to engage with your post are significantly higher. Now, there is nuance to writing for a video post.
Absolutely.
I think that in its most primitive ways, people could think I can just post a video. The video says everything that I'm trying to say. So I'll
Yeah.
post my video to LinkedIn and let the engagement begin. And I don't think that it works that way. So I'm curious, though, what your thoughts are on best practices with, and look, there's not a specific best practice.
Yeah.
Writing and creating is very much your own approach and style. And I think that the people who do very well have their own approach and style. But I think there are some good ways to help people to get started when they go to figure out what is my style and my approach. So what are you seeing as some things that do well accompanying video in LinkedIn posts?
So actually, we've recently been we've at Shield. We've always had a product tour that we do every Thursday, and we had paused it for a while, and we wanted to restart. So for the restart, we actually created a video teaser for the like a trailer for the webinar. And it's so interesting that we did one, which was the first one, where we opened with the questions, the topics that we'll be talking about, and which was essentially like imagine a white background with the Shield logo and the questions appearing and going. And then it had a small footage of me because I was one of the hosts, and Filippo, who was also the host, who is a colleague of mine at Shield. And it was a video footage of us with our names saying your hosts. And the video kind of ends like that. We got a lot of really good comments that, oh, this looks so nice, it's like a little movie, etc., etc. And then the week after, when we wanted to redo the trailer, we changed it up, and I started with the footage of my footage and then Filippo's footage. So what happened is, when that post was posted on LinkedIn, if you're just scrolling and you stop on a video, you could see me walking in a garden, and the pause and says your host Pragya, and then Filippo working on his laptop, and then a pause, like a screen freeze, and your host Filippo. That suddenly got a lot more engagement. So what we are figuring out is that people really love seeing faces more than just text passing as the opening thing, and that we could actually get a lot more people to get engaged on that video just by making that small change. So I think it is a little bit like the hook that we talked about in a text post, that the first few seconds of your video are so critical as much as the thumbnail. So the thumbnail, if it's just a standard white text with white background with some text about, oh, welcome to the webinar, not maybe that interesting. But if it's a thumbnail of me and Filippo, then it's like, okay, what are these guys doing here?
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's the same thing. It's about attracting attention the very first time someone looks at your content, whether it's video or with text.
And let's dive even deeper into the anatomy of the post that you're making. So, what do you accompany the video with in the actual post itself? I assume that you're not
Yeah,
just throwing the video up there and just seeing what happens.
that
So
would be
what so what are you posting in conjunction with the video on a LinkedIn post?
So this is very interesting because I think when you post a video, instead of if it's just a text post, the person before the see more button sees 5 lines. So whether it's 5 blanks or 5 lines all written, whereas versus if you post an image or a video, it's 3 lines. And I don't know if it's 3 or 2, but yeah, depending on how you space it. And so it's also important to remember what you write until where is your hook ending. So that's one thing to take kind of note of, and you can kind of like practice. You will get it once you do it the first time. You'll see it, or you can just go back on someone else's posts and see where the see more happens. The second thing is it's also important that when you put a video, what is it that you're saying? So the first time we put a video for a webinar, which was on a Thursday, I just said, "Do you want to hang with me on Thursday?" Question mark, space, and then it was see more. So people are like, okay, I see a video with her walking. And then she says, do you want to hang with me? What is this about? Is this an event? What are we doing here? So it's important to leave some room for imagination with the opening line, especially in a video, because people will see the video. Uh, in that sense, that if they're curious, they're going to stop and the video will autoplay.
Mhm.
Other thing that I would like to point out is that it's so important that if in the video you're talking, you have to have subtitles, because nobody is listening nobody is watching, consuming content on LinkedIn with the voice on. Um, and it's even more annoying if you're listening to if you have listening to music while you work, and then you see a video and you want to hear what the person is saying, and there's no subtitles. You actually have to stop your music, go back, all of that. So it's so crucial to have subtitles.
Yeah, and I love the idea of, using that hook area. And you're right, it's 3 lines. So you essentially, if you want to break it up like you typically see, you get 2 lines with a video instead of 3 with a text post. Most people go, line, space, line, space, line for their hook on a text post. And then on a video, you take one away. So you get line, space, line. So you need to be even more catchy with less words, which I don't remember exactly who said this quote, but it's a famous quote from writing, and it's, I would have written a shorter book if I had more time. So it's harder to write with less. And so, yeah, you have, the nuance behind video is that you have this amazing accompanying asset that you get to put out there, but you also have less to work with in terms of what you're going to write. And, you have really 2 different calls to action for your audience, which is, do you want to read what I'm writing, or do you want to watch what I'm putting out? So I think there's a lot to it, but I think that it gives you so much more flexibility to be able to do a lot in that small space that you get on LinkedIn, even though they are giving more space, which they want you to write on their platform. It's why there are so many characters allowed in a LinkedIn post versus like a tweet.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that what I have learned from what we are doing now at Shield is that if there is a video, like I said, I don't want to take the kind of the cake away from the video by writing everything that I have to say on the video. So I will put some lines that get the imagination of the audience going, that makes them wonder, okay, what is this video about, and what are they talking about, and I'll leave the video to do the rest of the talking. That's kind of how we are trying to do it right now.
Yeah, and that's great. And I'd suggest, I post video all the time. Go see some of the stuff that I do. It's, again, no right answers. And go check out what some of the stuff that Pragya is doing with video. Go look at text posts. There's just a lot that you can do. And I think the most fun part is where you're using a tool like Shield and experimenting against yourself and figuring out, okay, well, why did this post do better? And really finding out, what your own personal approach is to writing and creating and what have you. So I think we're coming up on time here, Pragya. So I have a couple of questions as we wrap up. Over the next 12 to 18 months, what can we expect from you and from Shield?
Actually, what you can expect is something very shortly. We were already working on a very cool video series, so you can expect way more video content. What we try to do in the team is, if anybody is interested in making videos personally, we try to get their passions out and say, okay, if you're going to make such nice videos when you're on a holiday, you can make some nice videos at the office as well. So we're trying to do that, and you'll probably see some of those soon. And of course, our goal is to create a lot of content that can help people be better, learn from the insights that we see, whether it's any kind of content type, whether it's video, text, polls, whatever have you. We're trying to create a lot of educational content that can help people without having to, whether you use Shield or not, that content can help you be a better content creator on LinkedIn.
All right. Well, I think that's a good spot to end. Pragya, where can people go to find you and to find Shield?
24/7 on LinkedIn.
All right. Well, I really appreciate you spending some time with me. It was great having you on Recorded Content.
Same here. It was a pleasure.